Wow, time really flies by when you're playing Classic, doesn't it? It feels like my ass is going to morph the seat of my chair soon, and I've been eating so many Cheetos that I now salivate whenever I see Donald Trump's face on the news. I haven't been neglecting my social life this hard in years. Actually, that's not true. I've always been sort of a tenebrous creature, avoiding people and leaving the house on any possible occasion, which makes it all the more frustrating when people insist that video games are what's killing my social life, something that couldn't have been more dead if it were the soul of a corporate suit. And of course, playing Classic also has nothing to do with my upload schedule, which I'm at least proud it happens slightly more often than the 29th of February, but this week attempt at a disclaimer is here to let you know that any time inconsistencies in this video that I've been putting off for forever are there not because I'm stupid, but because I'm a lazy fuck. And the points that I made still stand, and it would be nice to get a conversation going on this topic, since the team working on Classic still haven't decided what they're going to do with it in the future, and are currently wide open to any suggestions. Alright? Okay, now that that's out of the way, time for the video proper. A while back, in late 2018, an interesting conversation happened between The Quartering, a YouTuber, and Mark Hearn, one of the former team leads of World of Warcraft that participated in the game's inception and beyond up until around 2006 when he left Blizzard. Why is this conversation interesting? First of all, it's interesting thanks to the amazing insight you get into a gaming company's process of creating the product and the history of World of Warcraft. And second of all, and the reason why this video exists in the first place, Mark has his own idea of where he would see WoW Classic going into the future. In his vision, if he were to have the reins on Classic, the game would continue with its expansions, but modified to be more in line with the old-style RPG fantasy tropes and maintain Vanilla's philosophy on game design. So with that in mind, I made my list of 10 things I would change in TBC in order to keep things in line with the Vanilla Classic philosophy. And starting off at number 10, nerf quest rewards. TBC is my favorite expansion. It is one of the most successful and popular expansions Blizzard have released, and I'm sure many will claim it has no faults. But TBC is actually responsible for a little bit of streamlining in the game. Almost every quest line you take while leveling in TBC guarantees you will get a few items for your class and spec. And pretty good items too, that give you both good stats and secondary stats like hit, crit, etc. Plus, if you were very lucky, you could get some really good rare items from random outdoor NPCs, or just take them off the auction house, since they are BOEs. On the other hand, quest lines that lead you to group encounters, that then give you rare items, like the Ring of Blood and such, are cool, and they're fine as it is. But the rest of the reward system I think is overdoing it, and inflates gold making too, because once you replace these items you can then vendor them for some pretty heavy gold, for vanilla standards anyway. Number 9. Reduce number of flight points. The taxi system is a great means of moving around because you could easily have dinner while waiting to get from point A to point B and then get back to playing WoW. TBC however had 2 to 3 flight points per zone to where every point of interest was only a short walking distance away. Sound familiar? Obviously, it's not the exact same as retail WoW, but the patterns are there, and flying around really reduces the weight that the world has, especially later on when you have your own personal flying mount. So I would reduce the total number of flight points and focus on the old style time management around the cooldown of your Hearthstone, at least until you get your flying mount, but I'll be getting back to that later. Number 8. Change portals. From flying, we have a step up in reducing the weight of the world, and that's portals. I wouldn't make these go away, but I'll definitely change a few things. Whenever I think of portals, the first thing that comes to my head is the sad life of the poor NPC that has to spend his entire existence holding open a portal through space and time just so dipshit number 33,621 can go to the auction house, bid on some plants and call it a day. The first thing I would do is I would introduce a charge, a donation to the city if you may, and a costly one so that mage players can also keep on earning a living through space-time can opening. And I'd also make the NPC have a long-ass teleportation cast on you, just for the fucks of it. It's still convenient, but at the same time it's not. And I'd also like to see if maybe one day Blizzard will explore the side effects of using teleportation too much for traveling. Number 7. Update Alterac Valley. This is more of an idea I had on how vanilla AV might be improved, since AV is notorious for how long matches could last. The reason long matches in AV were bad is because there used to be a reward system in the game based around badges. Each battleground had their own badge as a reward for either winning or losing. You got 3 badges for winning and 1 for losing, but if the match never ended before you had to leave for whatever mortal reasons, you never got the badges and in turn never got the rewards behind them. And that's how the reinforcements mechanic came into the picture, which led to the AV Zerg. Having rewards behind objectives is not that big of a deal. In fact, AV had quests in vanilla, but I'm thinking of a slightly different structure where everybody wins from completing objectives. For example, taking a tower from the enemy faction would result in everybody earning a badge. I think it's better to create an environment where every action you take is in your best interest, as well as the entire team, since this is a team effort. And granted, that's technically already the case by default, because you want to win the battleground with your team, so you should be doing the objectives. But this would actually help players that don't know what to do and point them in the right direction, because hey, if you go where we tell you to go, you get a cookie. That's always a good thing. Something else to consider about AVs is that it had to compete with Warsong Gulch, Arathi Bastion, and Eye of the Storm later on in terms of length. And it had to compete because the rewards for the PvP season were more or less evenly distributed around the badge's loot table. An item like Merciless Gladiator's War Staff would cost 27k honor and 40 Alderac Valley marks, which would essentially mean anywhere between 14 to 40 AVs to get. So you had to do AV, and you had to do it in due time, but I think it would be better off if it had its own progression system, separate from the other three much shorter BGs, in order to allow it to be the epic battle it was meant to be in vanilla. Number 6. Remove Summon from Summoning Stones. Essentially make them meeting stones again, where they only indicated the location of the dungeon, and could queue up in the old group finder too. It's a no-brainer that warlocks will benefit the most out of this change. In fact, let's not fuck about, they're the only ones that benefit from it, and I think it's well deserved. Enough said. Number 5. Limited Flying. Now, if nothing got under your skin so far, I'm pretty sure this one will. I would change flying to where your flying mount only lasts for a few minutes and then has a cooldown. First reason for this change, same as I mentioned in my earlier points, it would add more weight to the open world. Second reason is it would reduce some player griefing, since you'd only have a limited amount of time to reach your objective, and if you drop off the mount before the duration is up, the cooldown takes effect. And for the third reason I made my next point, which is number 4. Give mounts various special utilities. Rather than just being tools of convenience or a nice decoration for your ass all the time, I think mounts should have their own meta in the game and give you access to certain wall-off areas, or give you special abilities. Say for example, dragons could do dragon-like things, like spitting fire to do damage, and mounts with a lot of lore significance, like the Ashes of Alar or Invincible, would have more interesting things related to them. Play out events and present lore to the player in-game. The thing with game designs like these is, you can never know for sure where it's going to lead, either something amazing or a total disaster. But looking in hindsight, if you think about things like arenas that were introduced in TBC, nobody knew what to expect from them back then, and yet they became a phenomenon. And they could have easily flopped and gotten removed over time the way 5v5s were removed due to low participation. And what I'm truly hopeful for, considering Blizzard's most recent, less successful systems from BFA, namely Islands and Warfronts, I hope that they understand the value of some bridges being crossed simply to find out if they should be crossed or not. Oh, and before I go on to my next point, I should mention no store mounts. Only mounts accessible in-game. But there was a cool thing Asmongold mentioned about an even more meta thing for mounts, where you can customize their appearance with saddles, ornaments and stuff. I wouldn't mind having those on the store so you could double flex on people, once for the mount and twice for the saddle. Number 3. Change Taunt. So far I haven't listed anything too game-breaking, but these final 3 ones would turn WoW a little on its head. You see, I like the threat mechanic that we used to have in vanilla and TBC. I think that it's more interesting to have the boss effectively focus on the most threatening target in the room. And this is not to say that I want warriors to be shit on because I'm salty that paladins can't properly compete with warriors in TBC raids and can't really tank at all in vanilla raids. Not at all. In fact, I think warriors should remain the main tanks, but when you think about it, Taunt is a very powerful ability. Not only does it force the target to attack you for 3 seconds, but it also brings your threat up to the person who grabbed the NPC's attention. And it's on a 10-second cooldown. Sure, it can miss, and it's not retard proof, you still need to gain more threat in order to keep the NPC on you. But in a world where most important cooldowns start on 5-minute timers and only go upwards from there, Taunt is a really oddly convenient ability. Especially when it's given to the only reliable tank, whereas I would go with diversifying each class's role as a tank. So you'd have warriors as your go-to main tank, with great damage mitigation, but no taunt. I would leave Growl for bear tanks, only on a longer cooldown, since I could actually imagine a bear going for intimidation by growling to grab the NPC's attention. This way they can pick up any bosses or rampant NPCs and fill in for tank swaps. How would the warrior be a main tank in that case if the bears are tank swapping? Well, since warriors would be the best ones at maintaining and building threat on a single target, they would just naturally out-aggro the bears and get the NPC's attention after a short while of the boss being taunted. And then you'd have paladins as the king of AoE tanking. Of course, this would only work out if all of the raids are specifically redesigned to be sprinkled with all kind of these niche necessities. But they should be. We live in a world where Blizzard chose to balance these things out by making classes more or less the same, which led to years of homogenized gameplay. And this change is probably going a little 180 in the opposite direction. Christ knows how many times Blizzard have already been made guilty of this before. But it's just what I feel would be best for the fantasy side of the game. Which leads me to number 2. Focus on classes rather than specs. Yes, TBC is responsible for this one. It's clearly unintentional and very subtle, but it led to one of the biggest issues we have today, balancing out 36 different specs and also making them feel unique and interesting. So what I'm talking about is gear sets being specialized by spec. It was a fantastic idea at the time, as it allowed hybrid classes to diversify their role in raids, but the core issues were still there, and raids like Mount Hydril show that they had this idea in mind of guiding classes to their expected role, but it was so poorly executed that nobody really liked that raid very much, and I have to wonder if this is one of the reasons Blizz might have backtracked from that idea moving into Wrath of the Lich King. There's also the issue of accessibility. Servers with lower populations may not have a good enough of a spread amount of classes across the board, and this is a difficult issue to reconcile. We'll have to wait and see how layers play out when classic releases, but if you consider that over the years things like class stacking and class gimmicks have always created an imbalance in the raiding community, it should make it obvious that there's no ideal way of creating a healthy raiding environment. What you can control is whether or not it's going to be an epic experience or a whack-a-mole. Number 1. Reduce level cap. This one I think would be the most game-breaking, but hey, I'm making a top 10 list of things nobody really cares about, regarding a game that nobody really cares about, on a channel that nobody views. So, in for a penny. The biggest mistake TBC ever did was ignore its own content. It's where WoW stopped being the World of Warcraft and started being World of Shattrath, Portals, and Flight Points, and it completely broke off pretty much any connection it had with Azeroth as a whole. Besides the auction house, there was hardly ever a need to go back and do anything in the old zones, and I think an expansion should expand on the existing content, not turn around and fart in its face. Ideally, the new zones should overlap with the old ones in terms of level brackets, to the point where it's optional for you where you continue your leveling, up until the max level zones. One of Vanilla's major selling points was the fact that the entire world was opened with no loading screens and no instancing, and sadly the game just moved away from that and started focusing more and more on endgame experience and how to get people there as quickly as possible so they don't miss out. In my opinion, MMOs should never be doing that, because what ends up happening is the player base is far too spread in terms of their capabilities, both skill-wise, how good of a player they are, and time management-wise, how much time they have available to play. And because this happens, you then have to dumb down the content. If you allow people to easily reach level cap but not be able to do anything because they're bad or don't have enough time, of course they will be pissed. So essentially Blizzard is forcing their own hand into trivializing content because of this decision. And to satisfy the hardcore audience, the only thing they can really do is further segregate and instance everything into different difficulties, which at this point pretty much feels insulting. Since I've started BFA, I've done all dungeons on normal to complete their story, cleared them all again on heroic to get enough gear to move to mythic, cleared them again on mythic, and ever since then I've kept clearing them again and again and again on mythic plus. Same dungeons, same loot, only bigger numbers. It's an unbelievably tiring experience, and it can be avoided with meta spread across all levels. Player housing was planned in vanilla. Just introduce that so people have something fun to do if they can't be bothered to level up and compete with everyone else. From level 10 to 50, there's a plethora of content that can be used around the system alone to give players something meaningful and interesting to do. In fact, if the game keeps on revolving around NPC farming to level up, player housing people might just end up ruling the game. But hey, these are all just my thoughts, and I'm curious to hear what you think about everything I've discussed, so let me know in the comments. Now, do I think Blizzard would ever implement changes like these? No. No, not even close. Bye.
Shut up and sit down.